Coming up on today's show, I want to run through the biggest winners and losers for the Browns coming out of the NFL draft, as some guys may feel some added pressure, while other guys may have a huge sigh of relief that their replacement was not drafted. Now, first, let's just refresh everyone's memories on the 6 picks the Browns had in the 2024 NFL draft. They started off with defensive tackle from Ohio State, Michael Hall. Then they went with his biggest rival from Michigan, offensive lineman Zach Zinter. Fast forward to day 3. In round number 5, it was Louisville wide receiver Jamari Thrash. Round 6, Mississippi State linebacker Nathaniel Bookie Watson. And then 2 round 7 picks, Miles Harden from South Dakota State and Cincinnati defensive tackle Jawan Briggs. So let's get into my first winner for the Browns, which is the entire running back room, as the Browns could have drafted a running back, which would have definitely put some pressure on Jerome Ford and Deontay Foreman for that RB2, RB3 spots when Nick Chubb is back. And when Nick Chubb's not back, well, they are the RB1 and RB2. So big sigh of relief, I think, from a lot of people in the running back room. Had the Browns drafted a running back, that definitely would have put a little bit more pressure on Ford to hold on to that number 1 job, or even Foreman. We'll see who wins that. I don't want to say number 1 because it's Nick Chubb's job, but if Nick Chubb is out, then it's kind of the de facto number 1 job. And same goes for guys towards the bottom of the depth chart. Pierre Strong Jr., John Kelly. Can they get a roster spot? Had they drafted a running back, that would have been a much more uphill battle. But Nick Chubb coming back from 2 season-ending knee surgeries, first one occurring in late September and then the second one in November. No real idea as to when definitively he could return. Maybe it's early in the year, maybe it's halfway through the year. It is definitely wait-and-see mode for the foreseeable future. But until Nick Chubb is back, it is Jerome Ford and Deontay Foreman holding down the fort. And had there been a rookie, like I said, I think you could have seen a much more engaging battle for the starting running back role while Nick Chubb is out. But instead, Jerome Ford and Deontay Foreman will just have to duke it out with one another for that RB2 role, compared to it being a 3-way battle with a rookie being entered into the mix. Now, the Browns not taking a running back, I think, signals either one of 2 things to me. One, a ton of faith and belief that Nick Chubb will return soon, and it won't be Chubb out for the first half of the season. That's my first takeaway from the Browns not going to the running back pool in the draft class. They believe Chubb is not going to miss an extended period of time. The other possibility is they just despised this running back class, and when they were on the clock at pick 54, the highest running back on their big board was 20 spots below who they wanted to go with. And then when they were back on the clock at pick 85, maybe the 1 or 2 running backs they did like were gone at that point, like Jonathan Brooks, for example, and Trey Benson, I think, got picked right before the Browns at 85, or maybe right after by the Cardinals. I can't remember right now. But the point is, they did not like a running back at any stage when they were selecting, and there were 10 players they liked more, so they decided, nope, we either believe in Nick Chubb returning soon, or we really believe in Jerome Ford and Deontay Foreman, which I don't know how anyone can be uberly confident that those 2 guys can do an adequate job if Nick Chubb misses a long period of time. If it's 4 weeks, then yeah, I think they can probably get the job done. If it's longer than 4 weeks, we may have some questions. Now, if you enjoy our content here, help us reach 34,500 subscribers. We're a little over 200 or 100 subs away, actually. So if you haven't subbed yet, make sure to do so. Get yourself the best Browns offseason content, as the draft is over, which means a lot of other places are going to take their foot off the gas. We're not going to do that here. We're pumping out daily videos still. First loser, though, for the Browns coming out of the draft is last year's 3rd-round pick, defensive tackle Siaki Ika. When you look at the Browns' defensive line room, it was already a little bit crowded. I mean, they brought back Maurice Hurst and Shelby Harris. They signed Quentin Jefferson. Basically, the Browns had 4 rotational defensive tackles, and that did not include last year's 3rd-round selection. And then to make matters worse for the former Baylor Bear, they drafted a defensive tackle, right? Michael Hall with pick 54 in the draft. So when you look at Siaki Ika's landscape here, it's a little bit tough. I mean, let's go back to the depth chart really quickly, Tex. We can just count out the 4 defensive tackles that are locks to make this roster in my eyes. Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Quentin Jefferson, Michael Hall, either being paid a lot of money or picked in the second round of this year's draft. So then you've got Maurice Hurst and Siaki Ika, and Hurst was 10 times better than Ika was last year because we never saw Siaki Ika last year. The guy didn't make his NFL debut until they played, I think, the Chicago Bears at home. So Ika, in my eyes, is definitely on the hot seat because we hardly saw him last year. It was essentially a redshirt freshman season. And you would think that if in practice they saw a lot of great things from Ika, they wouldn't feel compelled to go out and sign not 1, not 2, but 3 guys at his same position and then draft another defensive tackle. From the start, the Ika pick just never made a ton of sense to me last year because they drafted a guy who is 335 pounds to play nose tackle, and then they called him and said, we're going to turn you into a Ferrari. He's not a Ferrari. He's a human tree stump. Let him do that, right? Stop fat shaming. Let him be a huge human being that sits in the middle of the defensive line. Don't try and turn him into something he's not, which is some exquisite athlete. That's Michael Hall. Siaki Ika was not that coming out of Baylor. And that's okay if that's what you're looking for. A guy who's going to be a nose tackle that just gobbles up offensive linemen. But if you are expecting Ika to be a defensive tackle that gets into the backfield and makes big plays on the quarterback, you are always going to be disappointed. Now, going back to the Michael Hall selection, did you like the pick? Yes or no? Get in the comment section and let me know if you were a fan of Cleveland going with the Ohio State Buckeye. Second winner I've got is offensive tackle Jed Wills. Leading up to the draft, there were a lot of just rumors and buzz coming out of Berea that the Browns were interested in going offensive tackle in the early stages of the draft. Ultimately, they did not do that, which I think was a huge sigh of relief for a guy like Jed Wills, who was entering the final year of his contract, where it's a $14.1 fully guaranteed fifth-year option. But then the Browns, in the few weeks before the draft, restructured his deal, like Jerry Jeudy's, which we saw Jeudy get rewarded with a contract extension, whereas Wills has not received that just yet. But when they added 4 void years to his contract, to me that signaled we believe this is a guy who's going to be on our books and on our team for 4 future seasons, and we will fill out those 4 void years. So I would not rule out Jed Wills being the long-term play at left tackle, despite the underwhelming play for the former 10th overall pick. Now, the offensive line did not see any sort of additions made in the draft, and I think that's another sigh of relief for guys like Jack Conklin, Jed Wills, because I think there's a lot of faith right now in the offensive tackles rehab that all 3 of the top tackles, Jed Wills, Jack Conklin, and DeJuan Jones, are going to be ready to roll by the time the season gets underway. Otherwise, I could see the Browns taking an offensive tackle. There were a lot of really good tackles in this draft class. The Browns had some good ones at their fingertips at pick 54. Ultimately, they went with the other side of the line of scrimmage. So I got to envision that the injuries these 3 tackles sustained last year, the rehab is going well, and the Browns feel confident not only in their ability to bounce back from those 3 separate knee surgeries, but that they'll get back to their, tip-top form. Second loser I've got for everyone is wide receiver David Bell. This one's a little bit more of a reach than the Siaki Ika, but just hear me out because I'm going to land this plane. When you look at the Browns wide receiver room, it's not like they made a crazy early addition, right? Jamari Thrash in round 5. But I do think that addition does put a little bit of heat on David Bell's seat. Because when we look at the Browns' top wide receivers, we can just kind of call out the obvious locks to make the roster. Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash. So if you've got 5 guys right there who are already locked into the 2024 roster, now you've got David Bell competing with everyone else. And currently, I think he holds on to the last spot on the wide receiver room. I don't think Cleveland's going to give up on him already. Did he show us a whole lot last year? No, but he definitely got hot towards the end of the season. Had a really good Week 18 down in Cincinnati. And I think as we've seen him grow over his 2 seasons in Cleveland, he has some upside as a solid backup slot wide receiver. That's likely the ceiling for his career, but I think the Browns are okay to hold on to David Bell, knowing that going into 2024, unless someone just wows them in 2024's training camp. Now, before we get on to the rest of today's show, I do want to fill everyone in on a great deal going on with our friends over at Fanatics, which is this Browns t-shirt. And when you go to chatsports.com/CLE shirt, you can get this shirt, which is usually on sale, kind of goes in and out over at Fanatics, but there's always some great deal going on. So get started today and up your Cleveland Browns wardrobe when you go to chatsports.com/CLE shirt. Third and final winner for today's show is linebacker Devin Bush. The Browns signed him in free agency, the former first overall pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think if there was a game tomorrow, he would be one of the 3 starting linebackers. And it's a big sigh of relief for him because the Browns, sure, they did take a linebacker in Watson out of Mississippi State, but not until late day 3. And had the Browns gone linebacker in round 2 or round 3, there would be a lot more pressure on Bush to hold on to that starting job. But instead, it's a little fortunate for him. He does not have to fend off one of these top guys that got drafted. An Edgerrin Cooper, a Junior Colson, Trevin Wallace, right? You can see where all the top linebackers were drafted in the early-ish stages of this past draft. And it'd be a lot more of a heated battle if he was going up against Cooper or Colson or Wallace or Wilson for that third and final starting linebacker role. But instead, no knock on Nathaniel Bookie Watson, but it's going to be a little bit of an easier time for Devin Bush to hold on to that role going up against him. Now, I think Jim Schwartz is excited for the potential of Devin Bush because he was such a great playmaker at Michigan. And then he got to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and just look at the last 2 seasons, one with Seattle, one with Pittsburgh. No sacks, no forced fumbles, no interceptions, no big plays. And that's why he went top 10, right? Because he was more than just an adequate run stopper. He was a guy that could make the big play. And the Browns are hoping they can find that ability in him. Now, I'm not going to rule out Nathaniel Watson to put some pressure on Devin Bush because Watson was one thing at his time in Mississippi State: productive. Back-to-back 100-plus tackle seasons. Last year for the Bulldogs, he was more than just a guy that was the recipient of tackles being funneled to. He made plays on his own. 13 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 interception. Now, he fell in the draft, I think, in large part because of some questions and concerns regarding his off-the-field antics. But if he can get that all straightened out and cleared up and go into training camp with only one thing on his mind, and that's football, and not like some other previous day 3 draft picks, I think there's a really good chance that Nathaniel Watson will be more than just a special teamer in his first year. Now, what winner or loser did I miss? Do my job for me. Get in the comment section and let me know. I do have some honorable mentions. Greg Newsome, because he didn't get traded, so that feels like a win for him. Potential loser, just Wyatt Teller or Joel Petonio, simply because the Browns drafted an offensive guard in Zach Zinter, and Teller and Petonio both have big cap hits in 2025. So maybe the Browns were thinking one step ahead about, we might move on from one of those 2 players and replace them with a much cheaper option in Zach Zinter. So if one of these guys has an injury-riddled season or a much worse season than the other, that could put them on the hot seat for next year. And then I'll put Jordan Akins as a winner as well. The Browns did not draft a tight end. Had they drafted a tight end, I think there would have been a legitimate battle for the tight end 2 job behind David Njoku, but ultimately they did not. They waited till the UDFAs. So Jordan Akins has a sigh of relief that there's not 3rd or 4th or 5th round rookie coming for his job. All right, let's wrap up the show by picking a card. I got producer Matthew McCullough on the 1s and 2s today. Big Tex, which card would you like to go with?
Let's go with the Ace of Spades.
Ace of Spades, I like that. Good call, good call. I'm going to go with the King of Spades. How about that? I'll see your Ace of Spades. Now I'll lower it. Here we go, boys and girls. 4 of Hearts. 4 of Hearts. All right, that will do it for us on this edition of the Cleveland Browns Report. If you're still watching right now, get in the comment section, drop a CLE. I love to see the end of the video, crew.